All right. Welcome, James. We have a very special guest today. James, could you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself because you are not a Doxy.me employee, nor are you a Ukrainian.
No, that's right. Thank you for having me, I guess, first of all. So I'm James. I'm from the UK. And I very randomly became part of, I guess, the Doxy.me family unofficially when I came over to Poland on the 3rd of March or something like that, 6 weeks ago or so. And again, very, very randomly, I met Brandon, who then I basically, there's a long story behind it, but we then traveled together to Ukraine to meet his team in Lviv. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I've become part of this Doxy Me story journey, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so Brandon, of course, is the CEO of Doxy.me. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you guys kind of stumbled into each other?
I kind of wish I could, but nobody really knows. It's somehow it's got lost. I basically somehow got in contact with Heath, who I believe is Brandon's the head of tech, from my
Yeah.
understanding. Um, and so I must know somebody who knows him, who put us in contact. And for the life of me, I can't remember. Heath can't remember. And Brandon can't remember. So we don't really know who this person is, but somebody somewhere put us in contact. And then he said, "Oh well, Brandon's actually flying over to Warsaw later on today or tomorrow, whatever it was. That's where I was staying in a hostel, and perhaps you two can link up, and he can help you cross the border." So that was where it was all began. And I've gone through my chats, and I can't for the life of me remember exactly who it is, but mysteriously we came together.
Okay. So I believe the Russian invasion of Ukraine started on February 24th. Where were you on that day?
So then I was staying with my parents. So I'm from the southwest of the UK, and I was just spending some time with them back at home. So I'm in my late 20s, so I've flown the nest many years ago. So I've just gone back to stay with them for a week or so, a bit of a holiday. And that's when really it all came to my attention. I saw, I guess, a few weeks before, maybe a month before, it kind of brewing, and me and my friends would talk about it, and we I don't know what we really thought of it, but it's very far from us in the UK, so it was kind of just this weird, maybe third world war that was potentially going to break out, but it was just whispers, and we didn't really know what's going to go on. But yeah, so I was staying with my family, and then it suddenly happened, and it was a bit of a shock to us, and I guess to the rest of the world, and more so than any kind of geopolitical event for me in the past because it's Europe. And I know, I mean, when the Iraq War happened, I was very young, so it didn't really mean much to me. I was less than 10 years old, so I was too young to really understand that sort of stuff. But as someone, as a fully fledged adult now, and this is happening in Europe, it was a pretty big event for me. And to see what was happening through YouTube, on Reddit, all these videos, and BBC News, it was very shocking, really.
Totally. And so did you go to Poland with the goal of then going into Ukraine?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess I spent the first 5 or 6 days of the war reading up as much as I could on how I could be helpful in Ukraine, and figuring out how I'd get there and kind of any contacts I could find in Ukraine and what I'd be doing really to make myself most useful. At the time, I did actually sign up for the Foreign Legion to fight against the Russians, but I think maybe a day or two before I left to fly out to Poland, there was posts everywhere saying if you're not military trained, you're just going to be a hindrance. So I kind of wrote that off at that point, and I thought, right, what's the next best thing I can do? Which then kind of brought me towards what I've been doing so far, which has been transporting goods across country and evacuating people from the east back over to the safer regions in the west.
Wow. And so why do you think you're so driven to support the people of Ukraine in this time?
Uh, So people have asked me this before, and I have no connections with Ukraine whatsoever. I've never been here. I don't really know very much, or I didn't know very much about Ukraine before I came here. The furthest east I've ever been was the Czech Republic even. Um, it's they're us. Yes, they use a funny alphabet, and I can't understand the language, but they have the same morals, same belief system. They live in the same cities as us being West, UK, American, whatever. It's much closer to home than, for example, the Afghan Iraq wars, where they have very different religion, very different beliefs, and or the way they live for an outsider seems very different. So to see it happening in Ukraine in these big, very westernized, I guess, cities, it kind of makes you think, well, why are they getting this? Why was I lucky to be born in a country that doesn't have this risk, and these people who are the same as me, have the same beliefs, are unlucky and then being killed by 1,000? I thought it's unfair, and I'm in a position to help, so why not really?
Yeah, and you've touched on something really amazing that has come up a lot and has become more clear as I've done these interviews, which is that the people of Ukraine really are like us, like people in the United States, people in the UK. Um, they live in these very modern cities. They have some of the most impressive software engineers in the world, and we know that because they're our colleagues. Um, and they're just like you and I, but you're right with that alphabet that's maybe harder to read for us. But so you knew Heath, or you knew a friend of Heath,
Yep.
connected with him, and so that, I'm guessing, led to your connection with Brandon. What was it like? What did you guys talk about the first time you met in person?
So it was very interesting meeting Brandon because I didn't know him from Adam. He was just another bloke. It took me, I guess, it was only when we arrived in Lviv did I realize, okay, this guy's a pretty big deal. Like he's pretty successful. He's got all these people underneath him working in his company, and I started to learn more about that. So initially, just an American, and
Mm-hmm.
he is very, very typically American. Like the accent, everything. He's a big guy. He looks as American as he possibly can. So we sat down immediately and went for dinner because it was late in the evening when we first met. And it really is weird to look back on because I see him now as a pretty close friend because we traveled together for like 3 or 4 days, and we were both going into what we believed was a very much a war-torn country, and we didn't know what we were getting into. We kind of thought there'd be Russians around every corner or potential Russians around every corner. It is very different to that, but that's what we believed we were getting into. So there was, I think, a bit of camaraderie between us whilst we were traveling. So we kind of grew a close bond. But initially, it was funny because we just sat at a table at a restaurant, didn't know each other whatsoever. He was on his phone, I guess, doing business and organizing things ahead of time, trying to rent a vehicle for us to go in. I was using my phone to try to arrange what charities I'd be working with. Um, so it was almost like a business arrangement initially because we didn't know each other, and he was busy with his stuff, I was busy with my stuff, and we were both in this world we hadn't really been in before. Um, but then, of course, you've got all this time to spend with each other. We would the first day, I think we drove. We must have been 5, 6, 7 hours. We say we drove. Brandon drove, and you slowly start to chip away at each other. And I started to get to know him and realize that this professional front that I first met is it wasn't a front, but it was he was in business mode because he'd arrived, he'd come here for his business, and he was just asked, "Can you help out this British guy?" So I was just a random person he was giving a lift to. Um, so he was focused on his team and how he could help them. But then, as we spent more time together and we met problems in the future, we very much turned into a team where, okay, right, how do we solve this solution? For example, the next day when we were supposed to be traveling to the border to cross it, we were told by one of his friends or associates that he couldn't cross the border with his rental vehicle. And Brandon had a rental vehicle, and that was the whole reason why I was going with him to kind of use him as my chauffeur, let's say, to get me into country. But so at this point, we thought, right, okay, we can't take the car. How the hell do we get across? And for me, I thought the most useful way, uh, the best way for me to be useful in this situation, the war that is to somehow get a vehicle like a big van and start transporting goods. So I thought, right, let's literally go and buy a vehicle right now. And something which kind of became a little bit of a slogan for us throughout the trip that we had together was uh, kind of if there's a will, there's a way. Slash, I guess there's no real slogan for it, but without planning, things will work out. Just it'll work out, which it always did. So went to meet some guy who it fell through. We drove a long way out of the way to go and meet this guy who was going to give us some advice or maybe convoy with us. He didn't turn up in the end, uh, and we thought, right, bugger, how are we going to do this? So I was like, should I just buy a van? He was like, yeah, I guess so. So I just went on my phone, on a Facebook Marketplace, messaged like 10 different people who were selling vans within 100 kilometers, saying, can I buy your van today? So I was ruining any chances of haggling because I knew I wanted it right there and then. Got a few replies within half an hour as we were sat in this car park. And the first one, I thought, that looks good. That's a van. I don't know vehicles, vans. I don't think Brandon is really into his car so much, so he really didn't know any more than I did. So we drove to this place, and a young man was helping his dad sell the van because he didn't speak English. The young man, probably like 20 years old, so he did all the translating. And so we decided, well, I guess I decided, kind of using Brandon as almost like a bit of a father figure here, even though he's less than 10 years older than me. I was like, Dad, should I go for it? And he was like, oh, it's a van, I guess. So I decided to buy it. And at which point we realized the van wouldn't start and the battery was flat. So then we went off and sat in a pizza place and thought to ourselves, right, what happens if we can't get the van? And then we sat for about half an hour, and then eventually the van was fixed, and we picked it up. And after about an hour and a half of paperwork, I eventually had this van, and then we could go forward. And I completely forget your question because I went off on one, but um,
No,
it
that
it grew into a
perfect.
kind of a weird partnership of random things go wrong, and I have an idea, I fix it, or Brandon then has an idea, and okay, yeah, that's good, let's go with that one. And it really was a weird zigzag trail of eventually getting to Lviv from Warsaw. It really wasn't a direct route. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think here at Doxyme we have an opinion of Brandon that he is just a go goer. You know, he doesn't stop. It's all about speed and getting it done, and
yeah.
then trying the next thing. Did you know about the cargo that he was trying to carry into Ukraine?
Yes, yeah. I was just looking through some photos on my phone earlier to kind of refresh my memory of those days, and I came across a photo of me and him and his cargo of I think two, three, maybe even four huge rucksacks, like a single human would struggle to carry. But obviously, Brandon being the 6'5" monster that he is, get them onto the American plane, fly them across. Being military gear, I think he had night vision goggles. What else? I think med packs. He had everything. So yeah, it was very impressive him uh, wanting to, let alone actually bringing that, let alone even bringing that into country. So yeah, it was quite something really to see.
Yeah. So you guys had some impressive challenges and barriers to overcome before you had even entered Ukraine. So after you got the that van working,
Mhm.
were you guys then able to cross the border at that point?
Uh, Almost. I mean, so at this point, we had burnt a lot of time, and we then decided rather than trying to enter Ukraine in the evening at night and then drive at night in this war-torn country, uh, we'll try and stay somewhere locally. Um, and I think we got to the nearest town to the border, and we spent about an hour driving around to every single hotel that we could find. any rooms? We were happy to share a room, one bed, one of us on the floor. Absolutely nothing, nothing whatsoever. The place was um, terribly overrun in a in a in the context of it was a terrible situation by refugees. There were camps everywhere. There were tents everywhere. Every hotel was just full of people in lobbies, just standing there. There were police going in and out of all these places, trying to organize themselves and organize these people. So you couldn't get somewhere to stay for love nor money. I remember one place was really criminally trying to charge for a small Airbnb $7,000 for one night. So there were some really terrible, like exploitative situations. So I then called a charity who I'd kind of linked up with a little bit, and they said, "Oh yeah, you can be the first people to stay with us in the Airbnb that we've rented out, and it's right next to the border in this place." So we then drove off at about I think 8 in the evening, got there at about 10, um, woke up this little old lady, this little old Polish lady who didn't speak any English. And she had to actually come and fetch us from the local town because we got lost. We couldn't find the place. We went in, and it was very, very nice. It was actually on a ski resort, which we had no idea. We were up in the mountains. We arrived in the evening, and in the morning we're like, oh no, there's like a ski run right outside the window. It was quite something. Then we left, and I mean, there's so many little things to this story. I have to kind of go into detail just because it does kind of just give you an idea of what we experienced. And as we left, we noticed the night before that there was a big, uh, there was there were about 5 or 10 vehicles parked on the side of the road right next to the border, um, and they were all parked around what looked like kind of a trash heap. And what this was just a load of donations, blankets, boxes of clothing and food, mattresses, maybe 5 to 10 tons worth of this stuff just on the side of the road. And this we found out had come from Germany, and these vans were basically filling up their vans and then just driving to the border. So as we drove past in the morning on the way to the border, we quickly turned around, pulled over, and said, "Do you want us to take anything?" They were like, "Where are you going?" You're like, Ukraine? They're like, ah, no way, this is where this is going. So we pulled over and had some photos with some Germans who were surprised to see a Brit and American there, loaded the van, and then went to the border. And that was, I guess, the last challenge out of country, or last little story out of country, but it continues as we go into Ukraine.
Right. Well, don't let my question stop you. Just keep going. You're doing great. What
Uh,
happens next?
so so I remember we went to one of the very, very minor crossings because we went to the Airbnb which the charity put up for us. That was very, very far south, away from the kind of the motorway crossings. So we went through the mountains, through the forests to this little crossing by a river, and we got there. And we thought, bloody hell, this is absolutely dead. There were maybe 5 to 10 cars in the queue ahead of us to actually cross. So we thought this is amazing. We'll be over in 20 minutes. And just before we got into the queue, the security guard pulled us over and said, "Room for two more?" We were like, "Yeah, I guess." And then this man and lady, a couple, young couple, probably 35 or so, they jumped in. She was Ukrainian but spoke perfect English. He was Dutch, and they were married. And basically, they were had just travelled from Amsterdam, where they lived, all the way over to Ukraine to the border to try to pick up her mother, who was unfortunately dying. She was in the late stages of her life and was very ill. So she was queuing by foot and was very, very weak. And they'd come over to try to basically pick her up and then drive her back to Amsterdam, where at least she could kind of have her last days or hours with her family there. But they couldn't cross by foot. So they had to get in any vehicle that was going in. So they jumped in with us. Very fortunately so, because we found out that I was a bit of a naughty boy, and I had lost my driving license in the UK just before I came. Completely unrelated incident. Just on a night out, I lost it. So I was driving potentially illegally in Poland without driving insurance. But I took this risk because I thought, look, bloody hell, I'm going to war. I'm going to war zone. If insurance for 2 days driving across Poland
Yeah.
stops me, that's pretty weak.
There are greater concerns, right?
Exactly right. Uh, so I said to Brandon, right, I haven't got my driving license, so if they ask for that, I'm maybe a bit buggered. But if they ask for my insurance as well, I'm definitely buggered with both of those things. So we then swapped seats. So Dad was in the seat. Oh, sorry, Brandon. Um, so Brandon drove us across, and the Polish border guard came to us, and he went ballistic. He went mental just for the fact we didn't have insurance, because we'd just driven through his country uninsured illegally. So we said, "Oh, really? Sorry, didn't know that we needed insurance." And he maybe spoke English, but I think he was just trying to do a bit of a power play and just really scare us by not speaking good English or just really throwing it at us in a foreign language. But fortunately, the Ukrainian lady, she said in that moment of we need to get across, she just suddenly managed to speak Polish. So she doesn't officially speak Polish, but because it's quite similar to Ukrainian, she said in that instant she could understand him and she basically talked us out of it and got us to cross. So that got us through the Polish border guards, but then we
Wow.
had to do the same thing with Ukrainians. And with the cargo we had, they were searching through that. They pulled us over. We had to wait for other cars to go through. So that was probably 2 hours for 5 cars to cross. So if you can imagine the other bigger crossing points where they're going to have hundreds to thousands, I have no idea how they managed to get through because it was just the slowest process I've probably ever witnessed in my life. Then I guess once we got across, the couple thanked us, and actually immediately at the very start, front of the queue, trying to exit Ukraine was her mother. So she ran over to her, and then they kind of disappeared into the distance. We then started our journey to Lviv, and I very vividly remember me and Brandon as soon as we started driving, and we kind of got past the queue of cars who were queuing to leave, and there's constant traffic going to the border to leave Ukraine, but there was no one on our side of the road. And we just looked at each other and said, "Are we going the right way?" Because we're going towards conflict. Like, what the hell are we doing? But yeah, I mean, it was for us. I definitely say, and I think you would agree that we saw it as a bit of an adventure. It was under the worst circumstances, and it was no, it is awful. But it's the only way you can really think about it is how to make yourself feel okay with what you're doing. Is this is just an adventure? Like it's something I haven't experienced before. Let's just go and do it. But it
Yeah,
was. Sorry, go on.
I would like to say that if it was only at this point where you guys were questioning whether you were going the right way, that's miraculous in its own right.
Oh yeah, maybe it's stupid of us, but I guess together we maybe amped each other up to forget that there was some sort of danger. Uh, but I mean, I think one of the main things that really stuck out to us was for a Westerner, as a Brit and Americans, whoever, the quality of the roads. Oh my goodness, you think you just can't believe that cars survive. You have in the first town that we came to, and they had shops that Westerners would recognise, of which I can think of none right now off the top of my head. Let's say I don't know, a Walmart. They don't, but that sort of standard of Western shops that they would have there. So you have this very very Westernized shop, and through the main high street, you have potholes a foot deep and joining. So a foot, and then you have a few inches of the main surface, and then back to the next pothole. And we were just blown away by this kind of this crazy infrastructure disparity between what these people like the what they were how they were living in our Western world with these like people really dressed very very modernly to then this very very difficult terrain that they're driving on, and just it was just crazy seeing cars driving in a column, and then everyone would drive to the opposite side of the road to go around this giant death pothole and then back across. Little things like that were the kind of the first impressions of us to us, well, especially for me. I guess Brandon had been in the country before, of kind of some of the towns and how this place works. It was a bit kind of eye opening, I guess. Not in a bad way,
Yeah,
just interesting.
totally. And you mentioned earlier that you guys didn't really know what you were getting yourselves into when you were like what it would look like in Ukraine, and you mentioned half jokingly this idea of like would there be Russians hiding behind every corner. What, like, can you describe your feeling once you were in Ukraine? You know, you're seeing these roads, you're seeing damage, you're seeing the long queue of people trying to flee the country. Just talk me through your feelings as you're experiencing all of these things.
Yeah, I think something which really put us at ease very, very quickly when we entered the country, within about a kilometre of entering, we saw a fuel station. So we pulled over and thought, well, let's top us up because we didn't know what fuel would be like for the rest of the country. And as we did, I bought like an iPhone charger or whatever, so things were working fine in there. We bought it fine. And as we were about to drive away, this little old man shouted at us in Ukrainian, which of course we didn't understand. But he basically pointed at the wheel and said, "You got a flat tire." Okay, okay, right. So we then pulled over to him and he put air in it because he was working for the fuel station, and then we drove off. We just thought he's at work. His job is to put air in people's wheels, like, and there's a war going on. So it kind of made us think maybe, especially in these regions, life is normal, like to an extent, like people are going about their daily business, even though 30 meters across the side of the road, you had people queuing, fleeing for their lives. He was there just going to work, doing his job. So it really did make us realize that regions of Ukraine are under huge bombardment risk attacks by the Russians. But in the West, it kind of is business as usual. And as I've been spending time in Lviv, I'm speaking to people from different parts of the world who've come over, and we're just to get together, just shocked, sitting there having a coffee, seeing these people going to the opera. Like a guy I'm living with here, a Doxy Me guy, he said, "Well, I think I might go to the opera." I was like, "Go to the opera?" It's like, "Well, I mean, it's a weekend. Why not?" And it's crazy that you're living in what is in the news is one of the most dangerous places to be. People are going to the opera. So
Right.
yeah, it's mind-boggling, I think.
Right. Wow. And did you guys run into any more challenges on the road before you made it to what we call the Lviv hub, where the apartment where the Doxyme employees are staying?
Yeah, I don't know if it would be if you would constitute it as problems, but I guess our first experiences of the military block posts, we saw those pretty immediately when we entered the country, and then frequently every, I don't know, 30 miles, 50 kilometers or so. And these just constitute basically as of hedgehog anti-tank, like not triangles or whatever, X's made out of big pieces of iron, and big blocks of concrete, and then some guys with AK-47s in military gear. They stop you. What are you doing here? Wait, an American and a Brit? What the hell are you doing? Like, very confused. But when you explain and they smile and they laugh and they bring over their colleague, they show the passports and maybe they shake your hand and then you go on. So initially curiosity or almost confusion, and then quickly moves into enthusiasm and kind of almost delight that we're there because no doubt more often than not they are just seeing locals, and then to see Brandon, I mean, he is a distinct figure, an American with his big booming voice, and a Brit. It must kind of show some sort of support to them, especially when we say what we're doing and what we're bringing, and that he's got military gear coming over. I think that was probably maybe the only other thing that we came across on the way into Lviv, because this side of the west side of Lviv is very safe, and it is just people fleeing really. There's no sort of war in that area, and there's very little destruction. So yeah, I think we basically managed to get to the hub pretty unscathed, with few other issues. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, this may be kind of a big question that I'm about to ask, so answer it however you see fit. What has been your impression of Ukrainians since this all started on your journey between, you know, those the guys at the military checkpoints and now the Doxyme employees at the Lviv hub?
I think the best way to describe how I feel when I've been interacting with them is it's just extremely humbling. How they can, and it goes across the hub, Doxy people, people in the street, people in Kharkiv, everywhere. How these people can continue having a smile on their face, joking around, the work ethic of some of the people that I've interacted with, whilst this is all going on, is really incredible. I, I I struggle to believe that many other kind of countries or people would sacrifice not only their lives, because I know some of the Doxy Me guys have gone to fight, but also their finances, self-funding, buying vehicles, buying supplies, using everything they've saved in their lives to try to help soldiers or help the refugees in more difficult positions. It really is incredible. And then aside from that sort of thing, just how welcoming and fun they are. Like Lisa or Liza, I always get it wrong. She was one of the first people I met, and she was here actually, I think, just yesterday or the day before. And how fun she is and enthusiastic, and um, it's it's almost like I'm at home with a lot of people. Like they really are just a very welcoming and um, I don't know, enthusiastic people. Even when I don't
Yeah.
speak the language, to a lot of people that I've met on the road, I don't speak Ukrainian, unfortunately. I only speak English, and a lot of people, the further east you go, won't speak English, especially the older generations. But we get by, and the big smiles on their face when they hear my English, and the food they force upon me, and oh no, you're going to stay in my house tonight. Like it really is just incredible, really.
Yeah, and Lisa is such a gem. I don't know if we ended up including it in her episode or not, but she DJs. She she's
Really?
yeah. You should maybe you can get her to play a set for you sometime. But
Okay.
she's in in times of of peace. She has some pretty interesting hobbies that she sticks to. Um, definitely ask her about it next time you get a chance.
Yeah.
But okay, so you've made it to the Lviv hub. You've met Doxyme people. Uh, what has your life looked like since then? What have you been up to? How safe do you feel day by day? Why are you still in Ukraine, you Brit?
What are you doing there? Uh, so to try to be as honest as possible without being melodramatic. Uh, so the first thing that me and Brandon did was we met the guys in the hub, and then we very quickly drove into um, what you can think of as the town hall of Lviv to drop off all the supplies that we brought over. And as we were there, I met Lisa's housemate friend, who is basically running an NGO where they transport supplies from the west over to the east. And I spoke to her and met her for the first time, and I said, "Right, I'm here with the van. What do you want me to do?" And she said, "Oh, right, tomorrow or next day, would you be willing to go to Kharkiv?" And I'd heard that this was in the Far East, right on the border with Russia. I was like, "Yeah, sure. Like, that's what I'm here to do." And at this point, I have a very high risk tolerance, and I kind of bury my head in the sand when it comes to danger or problems or whatever, which is a problem and a pro, I guess. But genuinely, everyone around me was extremely concerned for my life. And something which really kind of shocked me was when we were discussing with some military guy at this center. He brought over a few of the guys, and I was there as well. And he was speaking to them very directly and quite almost aggressively in Ukrainian. And then at the end, he then looked at me and went, I obviously didn't know what he was saying, and that was his point. I didn't know what the hell I was getting into. I didn't understand the language. I don't understand the culture. So he was based, and what he said to them, and what he then translated to say to me was, "You're going to get shot." And then he showed photos of other vans with holes in the windscreen, from where Russians or maybe even Ukrainians who are seeing you bomb down the road at night with the lights on and think, "Who the hell is this person?" and have have to shoot because they are confused and they think it could be someone trying to soldiers, Russian soldiers. So that really shocked me and kind of made me think. And again, when I went home, people were saying to me, you really have a good chance of dying tomorrow." So this was I'd come to terms with this fact when I left the UK, and that is not what I signed up for, but I understand the risk, and I thought, well, I've had a pretty good, very fortunate life in the UK. I think it's time to kind of give back a little bit. So I was, and I guess I am still willing to risk my life, not in any way different to anybody else in this country at the moment, to help those in need. Uh, but yeah, it was something which I maybe thought maybe I'll die out here, but the fact that I was being told tomorrow you will die, it was a weird thing. I don't think very often in life you really think tomorrow will be the last day I exist. It was odd. So that night I really got zero sleep. I remember sleeping on the sofa, and I think I got half an hour sleep, and then Sky, the dog that's staying here, the bugger, he woke me up half an hour before my alarm. So I thought, okay, at least I'll get an hour. I only got only half an hour, so that was annoying. But then Olga, who is Olya, she's looking after the center. She was very kind, and she basically made me breakfast. So at least I had some food in me before the journey. Uh, um, yeah, so I think that was the worst I'd maybe felt. And I remember getting the taxi into town to pick up the van because we left it there overnight. And this is where I was going to go and meet my translator because I was traveling to Kharkiv with a man from Kharkiv who would be able to help, well, be able to basically speak for both of us when we got stopped by the military. Unfortunately, he wasn't a translator in the sense that didn't speak English, so there was no conversation between us, but he could get across why I was there. But before this point, I hadn't met him, and I felt very, very alone because I was just driving in the dark into the abyss. I didn't know my co-pilot. I didn't know anything. And I remember asking him when I got there. I said to him, honestly, what do you think our chance of survival is? And he took him a while because it's a question which I don't know you rarely get asked. And he said, I think we got 70-30 chance. I was like, oh, that's fine, like that's all right, 70-30. It's in our favor. And also he doesn't want to die. So he's local. He knows the back roads to take to avoid Russians. Like I trust in him. So as soon as I was with him, everything was fine. But before that, that night before, not knowing what I was getting into where I was going or what I was getting into in terms of the routes and stuff, um, it was a very nerve-wracking kind of time of my life, I guess.
Yeah, of course. But judging by the fact that you're here talking to me now, I guess you guys eventually made it to Kharkiv, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I think this. So I've done to date. I've gone to Kharkiv twice, Zaporizhia, which is basically one of the nearest towns, major towns to Mariupol. And then I've been to Kiev once. But this first trip, I think, fortunately, was the most incredible. Maybe is the best word to use, just because there was snow. It was -15 in some of the places. We had a foot of snow, which just made it even for the Ukrainians that I was going with. We met up and convoyed with two other men who were from Kharkiv. Even for them, they were like, "This is crazy." For March to have this much snow, no one on the roads, driving into Kharkiv, blown out tanks, staying in tiny little schools, like primary schools, just outside the city, no electricity. The toilet is what I would see in like Victorian England, a little shed outside in the field. All these little things build up to this crazy adventure that you're on. And I was told off for it. I took a photo of an icicle, and I used the flash because it was nighttime. And the guy said, "James, what are you doing? Like, there could be Russians in that field seeing that, and now they could be on their way." I was like, "Oh yeah." It's like because you've been on the road driving through just fields and little villages for so long, you completely forget really of what you are evading because you never see it. And people say to me like, do you feel in danger or like what is the situation? I say, well, realistically, everything's fine until you're dead because you either never see a Russian and you're always fine, or as soon as you do, you're going to get shot. So it's not the fact that as me and Russia, Brandon thought that you might see like some Russian guys on this corner and then you quickly drive this way. It's not that at all. If you do go into territory which is held by Russians, that's that's end game. Like it's over at that point. So for your whole trip and journey and life in Ukraine, Russians are just this fictitious little evil somewhere that you evade and you just see the remnants or what they leave behind. Uh, so yeah, I think going to Kharkiv on that first trip was the most memorable because as well we had 4 or 5 breakdowns, brake failure, almost crashed. We had to get rescued at 2 in the morning in the middle of nowhere because some bearings on one of the wheels broke, battery broke, had to push the vehicle, steering column broke. Everything went wrong that you could possibly imagine. We broke down countless times. Yeah, so it was 5 days, 4 or 5 days, I think, of unknown after unknown.
What was this still that van that you bought and brought into Ukraine?
Yep, same van,
Oh,
and I've still got it now.
wow.
Fortunately, the two guys who joined us on the convoy, they had their own van, and they are from how I understand it, they are part of one of Ukraine's biggest biker gangs. So they are both very hands-on with vehicles. They can like fix bits and bobs, and they understand if a vehicle's going wrong, they can hear it very, very rapidly. Whereas me, I'll just drive through it until it explodes. Uh, but with now knowing these guys who really are brilliant, I got on really well with them. I now have access to a garage in Lviv who kind of do mates rates to help fix the van, which basically after every trip you need to go to check it over because there's a district which is just south of Kiev, which we now have named amongst the three of us as the Death District because it's probably 100 kilometers of roads which are just potholes, connected potholes. But we're on a time limit. They want to get home, or they want to get there and then get home. So we're going over this road, along this road, even maybe 80, 90 kilometers an hour, and you're literally just trying to find which pothole to avoid because you're hitting potholes constantly, and you're just trying to find the big ones to go around. And your world is shaking, and then the passengers' world is shaking, and it's fun, but after about 2 hours, you're like, okay, I wish I could get onto a highway at this point. Yeah, just this country is not built to be good to suspension or anything else on a vehicle.
Yeah. And the fact that you've made several of these supply trips to eastern Ukraine really recontextualizes that first experience, that first perception of Ukraine you had that these roads are not modern. These roads are not as high quality, maybe, as a more Western person might be used to. So really incredible that after that first trip, you've made 3 more back to Eastern Ukraine. And do you plan to keep doing this now?
Uh, I intend to work in whatever way I think I can be most useful. Um, when I first did that first trip, everyone told me, and it's all I knew. So I thought I'm going to probably die. But again, I'd come to terms with that, and that was something which I really did kind of understand. But from doing these trips now, it's the risk is so low that I truly believe anyone who can drive a vehicle can do these sorts of trips because there isn't any risk, especially if you're with locals who can navigate you. So for the future, it's looking like I'm going to start working with some military people and helping deploy military from certain areas to certain fronts because that is kind of upping the risk and that's something which I'm willing to do. So I'd rather risk me than somebody who is not comfortable with it.
Hmm.
So it's still moving people or goods or whatever, but it's to more active areas, I guess.
Right. And have you learned anything new about yourself from this whole experience?
Uh, I guess
You can say no if you think this aligns with how you already thought of yourself.
it's difficult. I'm sure I have. I would say maybe. I think I've realized that I need people more than I thought. I've I like to think that I'm very much a lone wolf. Like I've come out here alone, and none of my family or friends know I'm here. They all think I'm in Poland doing generic charity work for this cause. But even though because of this, I'm not really in contact with them too much because it's difficult to constantly lie. So I try to just call them maybe once a week. But as I said to some people here who I've been staying with the hub, I wouldn't, I cannot really see myself still being in this country if it weren't for these people, if it weren't for Doxy Me people, because they have become my friends, they've become kind of my clan, and even when I'm on the road, all I'm all I'm looking forward to doing is returning and seeing them again. So I think it's made me realize that as much as I am a lone wolf, I need that group of people who are my family essentially to come back to. And I guess Doxy Me are now that.
Yeah, yeah, and even if you aren't one of our employees or colleagues directly, you are certainly, I would say, part of the DoxyMe family now. Um, and maybe that's weird coming from me because for our audience, this is the first time James and I have ever talked to each other. So I am not perhaps the best person to welcome him to the DoxyMe family. Uh, Brandon and, you know, Olya and Lisa and everybody else over in Lviv and Ukraine, I think, have already done a good enough job at that. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure I'm sure the people they and also the greater people of Ukraine appreciate the efforts that you're making as a really as a foreigner who many people would say doesn't have to be there. So I know you mentioned that you are keeping this a secret from your parents. Is that right?
Everyone I know, to
Okay.
an extent, in terms of nobody knows I'm in Ukraine.
All right. So you probably don't have much to say about how they are handling all this since they don't know, and
Yeah.
even even still, they aren't directly involved. Maybe.
Mhm.
All right. Well, in that case, uh, I would just like to ask you if you have anything else you'd like to share or any closing comments for us.
Um, I think really it's more of a thank you to Doxy Me and I mean Brandon for kicking this all off. And I mean the big man I met versus the man I now know. Uh, he is such a lovely guy, heart of an absolute saint, honestly. So I'd like to say thank you to him primarily for allowing me to stay in the hub and the guys for putting up with me in the hub because of course they have to speak to me in English, which must be a pain in the bum for them. Um, but yeah, just for the team and Ukraine in general, just to kind of stay strong and keep your head up because being as united as they are and with outsiders coming in, like they'll definitely get through this. It'll just be a bad time whilst it is here, but it will definitely they will prevail. Let's say that.
Right. Well, thank you for what you've done, James, for not just our company, but the people of Ukraine. And thank you for kind of being a part of the family. And also, thank you for talking with me today.
No problem. Thank you very much, Alex.